Welcome, Nis, Dee, Brian, to Rand and Henry's How to Play Twilight Imperium video, made specifically for the likes of you people. Twilight Imperium is a sick-ass epic sci-fi game in space where every player is going to be controlling a different alien faction. The goal of the game is to be the first player to score 10 victory points. You score victory points in the game by completing objective cards, and they're worth either 1 or 2 points. There are also two kinds of objectives. There are public objectives that any player in the game can score, and then there are also secret objectives. Cards that you will hold privately in your hand, and only you can score these points. Twilight Imperium is played over a series of rounds, during which each player will take multiple turns. But what we're going to do now is take you through each phase of the game round. Every round, the very first phase is called the strategy phase. In the strategy phase, players are going to take turns selecting from these 8 strategy cards. This card is going to give you a unique ability that you use at some point during the round. It'll also determine turn order for the round. Number 1 goes first, 2 second, so on and so forth. Each one of these cards has both a primary and a secondary ability. So when it's your turn and you decide to use your strategy card, the primary ability is the one that you get to use. However, the secondary ability is what all the other players in the game are able to do. It's also worth noting that in general, the primary ability is the free and more powerful version of the card, whereas the secondary ability is both going to cost players that want to use it and is slightly less powerful. So now we're going to take you guys through each strategy card one by one. This is the leadership. You might choose this card in order to gain command tokens, which will give you the ability to take more actions during the round. For example, moving your ships, building more ships. This one is diplomacy, and you might pick this one if you feel threatened and you want to stop other players from being able to attack you. This one is politics, and you would choose this card in order to draw action cards, which are cards that can give you certain abilities throughout the game. And you might also choose it if you want to have first pick of the strategy cards next round. This is construction, which you might pick to produce space docks, which are the structures at which you build new ships, or PDS units, which are structures that help you defend the planets you control from other players. Then we have trade, and this can be used to gain trade goods, which are able to be spent as resources to build units. This is warfare, and you might choose this so that your ships are able to move twice in a round, or so that you can both build a unit and move it in the same round. This is technology, and you would choose this card so that you can research a technology that gives you either a new ability or upgrade your units so that they're more powerful. This is the Imperial card, and you might choose this to be able to draw an additional secret objective card, giving you another path towards scoring points. And you might also choose it if you control Mechtorrex, the system at the very center of the board, in order to immediately score a victory point. Okay, so after the strategy phase, we've all chosen our strategy cards. We know the turn order. We move into the action phase, in which we're going to be using our command tokens to complete a variety of actions on the game board. Your command tokens are split into 3 areas on your player sheet. In the tactic pool, these are the tokens you're going to be removing and then placing on the game board so that you might be able to move your ships, conquer planets, or attack other players. You also have command tokens in the fleet supply. This indicates the maximum number of ships that you can have in a system or tile at any given time. Lastly, you have the strategy area of your player sheet, and these command tokens you're going to be spending in order to use the secondary ability of strategy cards. If you recall, the primary ability of a strategy card is for the player that owns the strategy card, and when they use it, all the other players at the table can use the secondary ability of the strategy card, which will almost always involve spending a token from the strategy area of your sheet in order to use that ability. All right, let's talk a little bit more about movement. So let's say it's my turn, and I've decided I want to move some ships. I'm going to take a command token from the tactic area of my player sheet, and I'm going to place it in the system to which I want to move ships. So I want to go here. I place the token there, and then I'm going to select which ships I want to move into this system. In this situation, when these planets are unoccupied, I land my units on these planets, and I immediately claim them and take the planet cards and place them in front of me. Every planet has two values, a resource value, which is the yellow number, and a influence value, which is the blue number. Resources you are going to be spending on producing new units and occasionally on an objective. Influence points will be spent on voting on agendas, which are cards players will draw and vote on to determine new rules or new aspects of the game. Okay, but let's say, for example, this system was not empty and another player had units or controlled these planets. I would still take a command token from the tactic area and activate the system. I would still move the ships that I wanted to move into the system. But then, rather than taking these planets for free, I would have to start combat and fight this other player in order to land my ships on these planets. It's worth noting that once you have activated a system with one of your command tokens, you are not able to activate it a second time during the round. Your ships cannot move into or out of a system that you have activated that has one of your command tokens in it. So something else that you might do during the action phase, in addition to moving your ships and taking planets, is using the production ability of one of your space stocks. So, just like movement, you would place a command token from your tactic area in the system in which you want to produce. Then you would decide which units you want to produce based on how many resources you have and the cost of the units. For example, this cruiser has a cost of 2, meaning that I would have to spend, by flipping planet cards, a total resource value of 2. So this has a resource value of 1. I flip it over, that's spent. This has a resource value of 1. I flip it over, and that's spent. So I've spent 2 resources, and now I can take a cruiser and place it in the system with my space stock. Remember, since you activated this system to produce, that means these ships can't move out of the system in the same turn they were produced. Unless you have the warfare strategy card.
Ooh.
So in addition to moving ships or producing new units, another kind of action you can take during the action phase involves action cards. Cards that you can use as actions will say action, : and this will basically serve as your turn. For example, place 1 infantry from your reinforcements on each planet that you control. So I would take infantry and put them on each planet that I control. That would be my turn. It's worth noting that not all action cards will be an entire action. There will be text on each card that explains to you when you can use it. For example, this one says, at the start of a combat round. And then, regardless of whether you move, produce, use an action card, one of your actions during the round will always be using your strategy card. So, during the round, players are going to continue taking turns until every player has passed. Once every player passes, that means it's the end of the round and it's time for the status phase. The first thing that'll happen in the status phase is players will be able to score points for their private and public objectives. Players will also draw new action cards, and now is the time at which they will also unexhaust the planets they've spent during the round. This means they're now ready to be spent again in the next round. So we covered in general the trajectory of an average game round. But now we want to talk a little bit more about 2 things: units and technology. So the bulk of your faction sheet is going to be taken up by information about the different sorts of units that you're going to be able to produce. Each unit is going to display a couple different values. Cost, this is the number of resources that you have to spend in order to produce one of these units. Movement, which is the number of spaces that this unit can move. And combat. Combat in TI is resolved by players rolling dice. The combat value of a unit is the minimum number the ship needs to roll in order to score a hit on another player's unit. In addition to cost, combat, and movement, some units have a fourth value, capacity. This indicates the number of other units that ship can carry. For example, the aptly named carrier has a capacity of 4. That means it can carry up to 4, a combination of fighters and infantry. Now, while most of the units are used in space combat, when you're fighting in space, once space combat is resolved and you're looking to invade a planet or land on a planet, you need infantry. These are the only kinds of units that land on planets and directly take them under your control. All right, let's talk about technology. When a player, for their action, uses the technology strategy card, they and all the other players in the game are going to get a chance to research new technologies. Here are some examples of technologies, like Sarween tools. This effectively just gives you a 1 resource discount every time you produce ships at one of your space docks. Some technologies in the game have prerequisites, and you'll know what these are by looking at the bottom left of that technology card. So, for example, these two have nothing in the bottom left. There are no prerequisites. However, if you take a look at this one, Fleet Logistics, there are 2 blue technology symbols in the bottom left corner. This means that before researching Fleet Logistics, you need to already have 2 blue technologies. In addition to these sorts of technologies, there are also ship upgrades. For example, this one, Cruiser 2. Some planets in the game have a technology specialty. This one has a red specialty. What that means is, when researching a technology, you may exhaust this planet, flip it over, in order to forego 1 prerequisite of that color. Which means if I wanted to research Cruiser 2, which requires a green, a yellow, and a red technology, by exhausting this planet, I would be able to acquire the Cruiser 2 technology with only a green and a yellow. We barely scratched the surface, but we hope this gives you a general idea of the sorts of things you're doing when you're playing Twilight Imperium. And of course, you know, if it's not all perfectly clear, we get it. We'll help you out when you get here, when we start playing as much as we can before it starts to get in the way of us winning the game, at which point we will immediately stop helping you. We hope you enjoyed this video, and we hope you will have fun when we all get together to play TI.